Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Sam Ruben from KTLA. Do you want to meet the cast of Manhattan? We'll bring them out. It's like a rock band. We'll bring them out one at a time, and they can grab these microphones, and then we've got a lot of interesting things to talk about. He plays Charlie Isaacs. Here is Ashley Zukerman. And his lovely wife from the show. You'll recognize her from this show, among others. Here is Rachel Brosnahan. Didn't John Benjamin Hinckley have a fantastic episode that you just saw? He plays Frank. Here he is, John. A truly international star. She plays Helen on the show. Here is Katja Herbers. And rounding out our cast who's with us tonight, here is Christopher Denham, who plays Jim Meeks. So John, let me start with you, and congratulations to you all. People are very excited about the second season coming in October. Look at that. And one thing that I think must be very gratifying to all of you is, you know, when I pulled up this afternoon, there are fans outside. Fanhattans. Yeah. So you not only have fans, you have fans that have names. Like Fanalos. Yeah. But the fact that the show is connecting with people. Talk to me about how that feels to you.
It feels fantastic. You know, it was a real leap of faith that I think I can speak on behalf of all of us, that we all took to jump on board this show, because it was this network that was in a lot of homes but hadn't done scripted television yet. So it was just starting out, and I think we all felt that this script was just an incredibly exciting take on this extraordinary moment in American world history. And, you know, for it to come to fruition like this, and for us to get a second season to be able to keep telling these stories, yeah, man, what's not to love? Yeah, it's really, really great.
A lot of you in the conversations that I've had with you before make reference to seeing this initial script. Rachel, when you physically saw the pages, what struck you?
You know, I think we've talked about this continually throughout, but that, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't learn very much about the Manhattan Project in school. And anything that I did have reference for was just about science alone. And this specific script focused so much on the people, and all kinds of different people from different walks of life. And I think that's what stuck out to me the most. It's not just about the part of history that we've heard before, but a more in-depth look at this strange community in the middle of the desert that was not built to house as many people as who ended up living there. And yeah, it's just a unique take on it.
One thing we've talked about, and when you talk about this unique take in the desert, the show is filmed on location in New Mexico. And I've visited with all of you there on two occasions myself, but you have all lived there. Christopher, people keep talking about the dust, and how the dust is this character, and how the light is this character.
Yeah, I mean, you go home and it's literally, you take it off your toothbrush, you know. And anything that anything that you sort of complain about, you have to remind yourself that this is a pretty close approximation to what those guys were really going through. We're shooting it at approximately the same time they were doing this, in the hot months of the year. They're wearing wool suits and dealing with the elements, you know. And our production designer, Ruth Amond, has done a wonderful job at creating a really immersive world for the actors, you know, where you don't have to, like, if you look 2 feet to your left, it's not like you see a backdrop of the desert or something. You're actually seeing the real granular world, which I think is a blessing for all of us, you know.
This notion, Ash, let's talk about this for a second, about how immersive things are. And does that inform the performance? Does it make it, because you're, and you would experience this if you had an opportunity to go on the set, you're there.
Yeah, I guess every time we get a script, it seems so difficult to actually mine it for how to actually play it, and so every element that brings us closer to the truth of it will help us. And what our set does and the location does is actually, and the costumes and the hair and the makeup and the style of the thing, that actually just takes all of those things out of the equation and means that day to day we can actually just engage with each other and the words to try to make sense of it. It just makes the job easier. I mean, I guess that's a ridiculous way to look at production design, but for us, that's what helps. I mean, when I walk into, we were showing some friends around the set recently, and they're amazingly impressed by it, and it's nice to see it through someone else's eyes for a second, because I can see how impressive it is, but our job day to day is to not be impressed by it, to think that this is just where we work, and that's our typewriter, and that's our desk, and that's our chair, and these are the people we work with. And it's wonderful that we've been given the freedom to actually have a space that just takes that out of the equation, takes the imagination out of the work.
You remember that movie Westworld? I'm old enough to remember. It's like that. It's like you go to work and there's 10 acres of SAG. Our sort of base unit is 10 acres, and most all of our interiors are there and exteriors are there. So, you know, usually you're on a sound stage on a TV show with like Chris was saying, a photograph backdrop of the city of Chicago, you know, and it's an airless room. This has more air, more verisimilitude than you could hope for, and so much so that when you leave set in your costume and come back like in your Nikes and, you know, regular, you know, now clothes, people look at you like, oh, that's what you look like. We thought you were that
They
guy.
don't recognize you.
Yeah,
I
they
showed my
don't.
mom around the set, and people were like, "Excuse me, you can't be in here." You know?
But you couldn't be in there, was the problem.
Katja, you've worked all around the world and had the most fantastic arc in the Americans last year, in addition to your work here. How is this different than other jobs that you've had?
It's just better. It's the writing is better. There's more time to write scripts. The writers are more talented, I guess. It's just
Is this
all
going to
around
feed
better.
into Amsterdam? Yeah, are they
They
going to
don't
hear?
speak English. They don't know. They don't know what I'm saying. It's not subtitled. No. It's not. No, I'm very fortunate. I'm very happy.
By the way, the creator of the show and the man who has written so much of it, Sam Shaw, is here somewhere.
Where are you?
There he is.
Come pop a squat on the stage.
I'll give you my seat.
John, let's talk about the episode that everyone here just saw, which you get a script like that. It's exciting. It's daunting. It's what?
It's so much fun. It was brutal. A little bit like sitting under these lights right now. These are some serious lights. It feels like we're being
To
interrogated.
make us look good, John.
Oh, that's right. Bounce. You don't need it. It was daunting. It was the first. I'm not in the first episode, really. Spoiler alert. And so this was my entree back into the world, and talk about immersive. We filmed in a prison in Santa Fe, an abandoned prison that had, in the early 80s, had undergone the worst prison riot in penal history, U.S. penal history. And you could still feel all the bad juju in this place. So it was you know, instant immersion. But I got to play opposite the brilliant Justin Kirk, who is such a great actor, and I've known for 25 years. We started out, our first Broadway show was together, and so to have somebody that you have a familiarity with makes an enormous amount of difference. But you know, people say, "Oh, must be so hard." But when writing's that good and you get to do so much, it's also an enormous amount of fun. And we had fun. You have to when you're in a situation like that, because the work is so intense that you have to have great sort of gallows humor and, you know, to get through the day.
All of you as performers, you know, the good news here, and it generated applause from the audience here, is the return of Manhattan for a second season. So to get on any good series is fantastic. To have a good series return for a second season is fantastic. Is there a different feel in year two? Are you all more comfortable? Or it's sort of more of the good same?
I feel like the audience now knows the characters better, so we got to go a bit deeper into who these people are, which I thought was excellent to do.
Well, and I think also, you know, You're saying more of the good same. I think certainly that's kind of what you hope for. If you're lucky enough to be on a show that has, sorry guys, I have like no voice, but if you're lucky enough to be on a show that has a cast that's wonderful and creatives as wonderful as we do and writers and a crew that's as professional and amazing as ours is, you hope for more of the same in season 2. You hope that it doesn't, that nobody develops a giant ego except John. But and
I was just about to mention your Emmy nomination for House of Cards, by the way. And Ash won an Australian Emmy for another. So they're on other shows.
And John was nominated.
So it's like they're cheating on us by these other. But no. So
thanks, John. But yeah, you hope for more.
But what's also interesting is that the show changes now so much that, like, I guess the analogy of the neutron replicating is helpful. That 1 leads to 2, leads to 4, leads to 8, leads to 16, and so on. That we begin the show in season 1. It develops in a way that we think we understand, and then it keeps taking all these corners. And then in season 2, we end up with an episode like this one, where we actually turn all the rules on its head. And that's what we keep doing over and over again in season 2. And that's where at times it felt like the same show, and at times it felt like something else entirely, and something derived from the same stuff, the same material, but a poetry all of its own.
And does that stretch you? Does that?
Absolutely. I think every episode we read a new script and we think, wow, that's where we're going. It's completely surprising and yet makes complete emotional sense as well. That's the brilliance of the show that we get to make.
All right, another spoiler alert of sorts. The 5 of you share a new co-star this season that I will refer to as the Gadget. And those who know is the actual atomic device. And there was a press event, and so several of us got to go there and physically see it. And I thought that was really extraordinary. I guess one way or another, all of you encounter it. What was that like?
Well, it was strange to. We were out in the desert at our Trinity site a couple weeks ago on the 70th anniversary of the test. So there was a certain solemnity to that, you sort of get lost in the moment a little bit, you're thinking, oh, you're on this fun TV show, blah, 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 and then the stakes are suddenly reinforced to you, that this is a story. I was back in Chicago and where I'm from, and some of my younger cousins, like 13, 14, have no idea who Robert Oppenheimer is, and the Manhattan Project sounds like some kind of bad cover band or something. It's like, what's that? And so it's like, it's just the cliche of you have to know your history or you're doomed to repeat it. The story kind of needs to be told.
Well, yeah, I think that's such a fantastic point. And that thought that the story needs to be told, is that at the back of all your minds?
I think one of the things that made this an extraordinary kind of adventure for all of us is it's not docudrama. It's I've referred to it as sort of historical science fiction. All of these characters are fictional, although they're all based on real people and real stories that happen there. But as Ash was saying, Sam and the writers have sort of blown up the idea of it and basically said that everything that happened after we let that genie out of the bottle by creating that gadget also happened there in that time and place. So if this episode is kind of an idea of maybe Guantanamo Bay or waterboarding or what the government is capable of by any means necessary, and it's maybe where some of these scientists, these very mostly left-leaning political thinkers came here with one idea in mind and quickly saw that it was doing this thing that was the greatest scientific breakthrough in the world. It was going to end the war, both amazing things, but also was the birth of an industrial military complex that even they were, as brilliant as they were maybe a little naive to. So I think the idea that Sam was kind of audacious enough to, we were just talking the other day, E.L. Doctorow just passed away, and his obituary in the Times is such an extraordinary life and letters, and he did that so brilliantly. I'm sure Sam would be embarrassed to be compared to, but I do compare him to him. It's like what he did in Ragtime and the Book of Daniel and Billy Bathgate is he took moments in history and made them kind of allegorical by putting fictional characters in there. And so you could really spin out in this thing. And I think that excites all of us, that it's not, we're not being slavish to history, and some people may not like that, but it's one of the things I love about it. It has balls that way.
And I think it's also a show where each of our roles on it are so specific and different that we all represent a different notion in that time. The naivety that John was talking about is so important to know that there's pre-1945, and the show that Sam and the other writers are putting together, they're aware of the bigger picture, but person to person, we're playing something that existed only in that time, which is knowledge of a world before Trinity. It's too easy for us to look back now and think of what might have happened or what should have happened, but this was a very specific time, which emotionally is no different to our time, and the decisions we make are no different. But in terms of our relation to our government, our relationship to that weapon, that was a very different time, and I think we all represent someone different in that way, and that's our.
And I think that's something that the writers have done really well too this year as the season progresses, is that each of us, every character on the show really has a different take on the morality of the bomb and if we should use it, and that the show doesn't really adopt a specific political stance about that issue. You know, once you think that we're leading you down this one rabbit hole, someone else comes out and says something that contradicts it, and he has a really interesting case for his point. You know, so it's not, I think people kind of expect, oh, you know, it's a Hollywood TV show, it's going to be pretty strictly liberal or something, and it's more ambiguous than that this season, I think.
One thing, as you were all watching this, and you may or may not have it bled over, I was struck by the fact, and many of you probably had this experience, you walk on the set of a show and you feel a vibe. And so having had the opportunity to go on the set of your show, and just in this green room next door here, there's this extraordinary camaraderie amongst all of you. And you're nodding, Rachel, because I think that isn't always the case. What facilitates that? Why? Let's talk about why when it's not the case.
Right there, she cast these two. They cast us all. Yeah.
Here's our casting director.
Thank
Why don't you guys
Jeannie.
stand up for a
Thank
second?
you.
I do wonder sometimes if you also thought about if we'd all get along.
How did you know?
Because I think we really do.
Well, like, no, well, what were you making this joke last year? We were like, no one's a jerk. But then it's usually the person who says that who's the jerk. So I guess right now it's me. but it's nice, you know, I do think, and on some, you know, people keep asking, on some very small level, I think, you know, obviously we, in no way can we really relate to what the families and the men and women and children who came to this strange place went through. But one of the nice added layers of semi-authenticity is that, you know, none of us are from New Mexico. We all came from all over the world and all over the country to be there and make something that we believe in, and we had to find a way to work together, which luckily wasn't very hard, but also to lean on each other. Like out there, we are our family and friends are all over the place, and I think that helps. Being on location is nice that way.
I think it's also a good moment to mention, we were just talking about this before we walked out here. Tommy Schlamme, who put us all together, he's just... we were just mentioning this because we were talking about another job where somebody got replaced, and there is a vogue now in this business, and this is, I think, something SAG could really look at. There's a real vogue now of replacing somebody at a table read. Like, it just happens so much more frequently than when I was young in this business a million years ago. And it just makes, it's made those two words, table read, the two most dreaded words for an actor to hear. You have to go to a table read. And Tommy Schlamme said to the network, to the studio, I will only do a table read on one condition. You cannot replace, you cannot give me a note about any of the actors. I have chosen these people, they are my family, and they, to their credit, said, okay. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why we all get along, because we feel protected by the people who gave us these jobs, and that we are their choice and they're sticking by it. And it just makes for such an esprit de corps. I wish Connie was here.
That is so well said, and it also makes me think of what Rachel just said, this idea of being involved in something that you believe in. And, you know, I'm sure so many people in this room, and probably people sitting here, have had that job or two or three, you know, it's the underwear commercial that you don't really believe in. How much does that, I don't know, help?
Enormously. I mean, I think that's a given. When you believe in something, you're not really working. You know, when we first got to Santa Fe again this year, you know, we had a wonderful time last year, but I think, you know, when you're there, last year we were there for almost 5 months, you're excited to go home and to sleep in your bed and to see your family and friends. And Harry Lloyd, who's unfortunately not here with us today, and I were talking when we first got back to Santa Fe this year, and both of us were kind of like, I feel like we got here and we breathed a sigh of relief. We've been traveling, we've been busy, and now we're back in Santa Fe, and it feels like a paid vacation at times. You know, sometimes it gets crazy, but really, like, we get to all be here. We're so lucky to be shooting in Santa Fe as well. It's beautiful. The food is amazing. The people are great, and it really did feel that way. I don't know about you guys, but I got back and I was like, okay, great, I'm ready. You know, this is excellent.
But if you believe in something, it's also easier to give your heart and soul to it, and that makes, I guess, if we're fortunate when you're acting, you can involve all of yourself, and this is a project where I happily will want to give everything that I have to it, and some days you succeed and some days you don't, but yeah, that's I guess what acting, at least to me, is it's very vulnerable. So if you're doing it for an underwear commercial, like you say, I think you can get bruised from doing it. But if you're doing it for something that you really believe in, it's a very rewarding and very beautiful thing to be doing, and a wonderful profession if you have good material. And that's this show.
That's so well said. You've had an interesting experience because you've been involved in shows in your native Holland that are enormous hits that like the entire country watches. And talk to me about that a little bit, because the critics have embraced this show, the people who have seen it have embraced this show. Would you feel better if it were this giant hit? Does that kind of stuff matter?
Well, I'd feel a lot better once we get renewed. So that's my main. Yeah, that would make me feel a lot better, and I guess a bigger audience would mean more seasons. So for that reason, yes. But outside of that, I don't know. Yeah, sure.
It doesn't really seem to affect the on-set environment, because as we've said, everything is so wonderful that, you know, and when you're making it, I don't think that, at least it's not our job to think about who's watching it or not watching it or who we want to be seeing it. We're there to do this thing that, as we've said, we've so loved to be a part of. And, you know, obviously we want people to watch the show because we're proud of this thing that we made, but it's been amazing to hear the people who do watch the show responding to it, and it's so enormously positive, and that's all we could really ask for.
And are there responses, I don't know, not necessarily what you would expect, but I always think it's interesting how we'll use the phrase Fanhattans. People, like, you might think, this is the good part of the show. And the fan will say to you, hey, it's actually this part.
I don't think that that's really our business. And I think it's great that we are on a show that, like great art, you can look at it one day and it means one thing to you, and you look at it the next day and it'll mean something else entirely. And we're on a show with not just one side, but a million sides. And I hope that people take something that we don't intend out of it. I hope people take something that we never thought of out of it, depending on whatever their lives are. I think, like you said before, that so we're on a show that not a lot of people watch because of the climate at the moment. There's so much great competitive television, and I mean, that's why it's such an honor to be a part of that, to be on one of those shows. And I think we're doing our job, and I think we're making great television, and I think that in time people will find it once they've finished watching their other shows. But
Well, you know, that's funny. Tommy Shalami said something to me which I thought was so interesting, and he said, you know, when The West Wing was on, and I don't think he was, you know, being precious or anything, he goes, there were like 2 good shows on. And he goes, now there's at least 15 fantastic shows.
15.
Yeah.
More than that.
Do you think, but are you cognizant of that? People reference this golden age of television and all
Now
that.
you're at dinner parties and people say, oh, there's that show, and you've never even heard of the show. A couple of years ago, it was like, oh, yeah, I've got to put that show on my DVR. And now it's like, I've never even heard of this network, this show, these people.
But it's exciting in a way too. I mean, it is. I think it's more analogous to the music scene now. You know, the independent labels and the like. No one I know, and I don't think I listen to any band that's on a major label now. You know, none of them have to sell 30 million records to exist. You know, like you can exist on the fringes and find a good following.
We asked several of you before the evening began to submit questions on a card, which you've done. So, Ashley, the first question's for you, and it is from Austin in the audience, who writes...
Raise your hand.
There
Yay!
he is. You display such a raw and undeniable loyalty in your work. Can you talk about how you create that?
He's like, it's just me.
That's very kind, firstly. I think it goes to what Katja was saying before, that when you care about something so much, it makes it very easy to be open and vulnerable to it and work day and night for it, to understand it. And I think also Charlie was created in part by me, but very much created by Sam and Tommy. And I think, oh man, I don't know. I think if you really, yeah. Wow, is this fascinating? I'll get to it. I'll get to it. You know what? I think it just goes back to that I think it's. I find the material so far out of my reach that I just spend all my time trying to understand it and try to work on it and try to get there. And I think that's probably helpful because that's probably who Charlie is as well. So I think, yeah, that might answer your question. Thanks, sir.
All right, this is a question that has no name on it, and it says here, Sam Ruben, will you share with us your private phone number? No. All right. This is, I guess, for all of you. Being on a show about a major event in physics history, has that made you curious about advances in the field or about physics in general? Because you tell me, coming in, did any of you have any scientific? No, of course not. Right.
If we're good at anything else, we wouldn't be here.
That's great.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
I think it's one of the gifts of our profession that whenever you enter a new world, you have the opportunity to immerse yourself in it and to understand as much as you can about it, or as much as is necessary to be able to look at a blackboard full of work and look like you know what it means. But I think that here we go again. Great. All right. I think that.
Go back to that other question.
I think that naturally what happens is that you become fascinated in that material. I mean, I think that's already our knowledge of those experiences and those people. How about this one? How about this for an answer? I think from really early on, I was fascinated by the physics, and I threw myself into that element of it. But from the first week, it became very apparent that our job on this was not to understand physics. It's actually to understand the mindset of these people, and that's a far more, I think, complicated question to answer, and that's also a far more fascinating question and something more central to our show as well.
Christopher, this is going to be for the whole panel. This comes from Christina, but we'll start with you.
Where's Christina? Shy.
Shy. That's okay. Because here's the thing. I think a lot of people sitting there would be very happy to sit here. So with that in mind, what's the best advice you've ever received in your acting career?
It's not like I remember one aphorism or anything, but I guess, I mean, it's such a cliche at this point, but persistence. One of my favorite actors, I'm sure you guys all know him too, Dennis O'Hare. He said something once, not to me, but he was saying it to somebody at a dinner or something, and he said, like in baseball, if you hit 3 out of 10 balls thrown at you, you're in the top of the league and bordering on historical record-breaking. And I feel that way too in acting. If you're lucky enough to get 2 out of 100 jobs, you could have a pretty decent year. It's not so much about winning the game, it's like staying at the table.
Katja, go ahead.
Dare to suck. I like, but this is more so in the theater, but I like to rehearse really ugly. Like do really ugly rehearsing to try to get into a new place where your mind might not go, not your safe zone. You don't have time for that in television, by the way. But yeah.
John?
What they said. Persistence. I've been in the business a long time now, and a long time from the theater. I don't need this mic. Yeah, it's all about. It's just you're constantly having to get yourself back in the game, and it never gets any easier. Meeting on a job or the times you have to read, and there's never a level to which you ascend. And I know people who are at the very top to where you feel comfortable in this business, and that's part of what you're saying too. You have to dare to be bad and ugly and put it out there so people will take it.
So do the people at like that top level, do they feel
bitter?
They also don't feel. Nobody feels good in this business.
Makes me so happy when I talk to them. It's like, you're bitter?
All right, so share with us your wisdom.
Hug? Like, should we all hug
I
each
feel
other?
like we should at the end of this. Yeah, a couple come to mind. I mean, the main one, I think, this also kind of sounds cliche, but has come to mean different things to me over the years. As I think we've all been trying to make this happen. But Jeremy Irons once said to me, in his beautiful voice, that that you have a gem in your pocket that doesn't look like anyone else's, and don't let anyone take it from you. Which I thought was so beautiful, and again has meant different things to me over the years. And then he sort of expanded to say that, like you are the only you, and that people either want you or they don't want you. That you're not ever competing with anybody, which really opened the entire thing to me. That it's not about I lost this job to this person. It's that it wasn't my job, and that something will be. Because I am the only me, and eventually I will be what somebody wants or needs. But to hold on to that for dear life. Yeah.
Bad news, Ashley. Now you have to top that.
Never go after an applause. That's my advice. I guess it's just always. The fallacy is that we in some way know what we're doing, but we keep struggling with it. And I think acting is something that you just have to do whenever you get a chance to do it. And if you're not prepared to, if you can't act somewhere and someone gives you a fringe or what would you call it here, like a theater company. Yeah, like a student film or a fringe theater company, an amateur production of Shakespeare, and you're not prepared to do that, but because you want to be on television, I think then probably you just don't want to act. So just take every opportunity you can and do it in every room that you can. Whenever someone gives you a chance, you just do it.
All right, our final thought before we all on the panel leave you here. Tomorrow, I think the majority of you or all of you are going to sit in front of another room of television critics who presumably are going to disseminate. John's excited about that. What do you want people to know about the show this year?
That it's not just about science. I think the people who watch the show know that already, but one of the misconceptions, a lot of the press that we met in in Santa Fe who came to do the junket brought this up, but they're saying, people think that this is a show for people who like science, but that there really is something in it for everybody, that all of these characters represent completely different people in different walks of life and have opinions and thoughts and feelings that somebody can relate to. It's not just for boys, it's not just for girls. We look at a lot of different stuff here. Yeah. It's a good show. Watch it.
Perfect. Well, there you are, ladies and gentlemen, the cast of Manhattan.